speaking to you if we ain't breaking no bread.
Welcome to Night City, the city of dreams, a place where in the year 2077 you can be whoever you want, however you want. You can sit in your penthouse suite overlooking the views, own the sidewalks and the asphalt, live on the outskirts tearing through the desert, give up your physical body to spend your days in machines, sneak through enemy territory, beef up to be the best brawler in town, or overcompensate to crash out as a cyber psycho. The opportunities are endless in Night City, as long as you have the drive to follow the 3 rules. Rule 1, style over substance. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you feel and look cool doing it. Rule 2, attitude is everything. If you're faking who you are, this city will tell, so be yourself to the T. And finally, Rule 3, the most important, live on the edge, where there's infinite risk, but infinite reward if you play your cards right. No matter what, Night City will chew you up and spit you out. But these 3 rules are what will decide if you end up a stain on the side of the road or a living legend at the top of the top, going out with a blaze of glory.
Want my money on the double, want my money on the double, want my money on the double, I don't come for play. Want my money on the double, want my money on the double, want my money on the double, I don't come for play.
In order to truly understand Night City and Cyberpunk 2077, we have to understand the genre of Cyberpunk as a whole. So let's go back to movies like Blade Runner, Tron, Akira, Ghost in the Shell, and of course, The Matrix. Movies that didn't envision the future as a sleek, bleached utopia, at least not for the vast majority of people. Instead, the future is rough and gritty, taking place in megacities filled to the brim with crime and unrest. In a cyberpunk world, everything can be bought or sold, even people. In fact, especially people, as any imperfections present within the human body can either be genetically or cybernetically weeded out. It gets to the point where the line between human and machine is non-existent, as humans can even be enhanced to the nth degree, if you have the cash to afford it, that is. But most don't, as what makes cyberpunk punk is its depictions of oligarchic, late-stage capitalist worlds where a small handful of corporations now have complete control over everything. The word monopoly doesn't even begin to describe it. Competition is non-existent, as companies pound opposition into the dirt by literally going to war with them, all while having no regard for who gets hurt as long as it appeals to investors. Often the protagonist of a cyberpunk tale is the little guy, not often necessarily going against the corporate overlords, as that is now hopeless. Their massive skyscrapers become like prison walls, as few even live in them but the ultra-wealthy. Those below can only hope to make it through the day by whatever means they can, with whatever tools they have. Therefore, Night City is the perfect encapsulation of the cyberpunk genre.
You don't believe in no fate, every day digging the grave, step in the pit with the snakes, city of dreams, city of gang.
Starting off with the 3 types of origins or life paths one can have when they choose to start the game. The first being a nomad. Nomads were once farmers who were forced out of their land due to every sort of circumstance one can think of. So it's nothing but their clothes and their wheels. They traveled the US. Most form communities, clans, families, bonds that hold them together for life. Leaving one's family is the cardinal sin among the nomads. Though there are those who stare from the outskirts of places like Night City, wanting a different life than the barren desert. Then there are the street kids, those who are born at the bottom rung of Night City, who know the concrete wasteland better than anybody else could. Knowledge is money when it comes to making it day to day in Night City. As a street kid, you know the best routes, the best places to lay low, the best food to eat, the best weapons for the job, the best people to trust, and most importantly, whose territory you're in, as Night City is divided into districts, the most prominent being the city center, home of the famous holographic koi fish, where the corporations work business by day and come down to play by night. Just north of the city center, we have its polar opposite, Walton, the poorest district in Night City, home to slums filled with workers who can barely scrape by, though it is also the richest, if you know what you're looking for, as anything can be bought and sold here, with a heavy emphasis on the unethical, though it's a dangerous place to hang around, as it's right in the middle of a gang war. One of those gangs is the Tiger Claws, whose main territory is just south, called Westbrook. They run a tight ship down there, in order to keep up Westbrook's reputation as the nicest place to live in Night City. Well, if your wallet is big enough, of course, because if not, just south of Westbrook is Santo Domingo, home of Night City's seemingly endless megafactories under endless construction. This is where a good chunk of the city is employed, both not only as workers, but security. Investors wouldn't want to risk any loose material with the city's infamous districts, Pacifica and Dogtown, being just west. These are two places where neither the NCPD or corporations have any control over. Instead, it's run by tyrannical warlords who rule with an iron fist, which might be better or worse for you, depending on who you're friends with. And finally, just north of Haywood is a sort of microcosm of Night City, I call it. Where up top we have the rich and their fancy buildings, but down below we have the poor and their not so fancy buildings. No matter where you are though, count yourself lucky, as Haywood is far from the worst place to land on your feet. Though any good street kid should be able to make themselves at home in any district in Night City. Especially if you're aiming to get to the top. Though if you choose my personal favorite life path in the game, Corpo, you already are. Oftentimes born with a silver spoon in your mouth, freshly graduated from a top university, you're thrown into one of the handful of corporations that govern the world. Most likely is Arasaka, run by a family that may or may not be immortal. Some take their chances working for Militech, the biggest arms dealer on the planet who only builds the best and most destructive for their clients, which seems to be just about anybody willing to pay. There is also the Trauma Team, a sort of privatized EMT group that will only save your life depending on whether or not you're one of their esteemed paying customers. If not, well, death might be a sweeter escape than Night City. Of course, there are others a corpo can work for, but they are all the same if you don't have what it takes to survive, as the upper class world is one full of spying, betrayal, and backstabbing, just for that new promotion or profit boost. It's a life where you can't trust anybody, especially yourself. Though no matter what life path you choose in Cyberpunk 2077, you'll inevitably end up at square one as V, the protagonist, or I guess your protagonist. Despite having their own voice and personality, V is your character to customize from the beginning with Cyberpunk's wealth of options. A lot for a game entirely played in first person. We start out at rock bottom with V, slowly working our way up the ladder in Night City, doing odd job after odd job, until one where all goes wrong. After somehow surviving a bullet to the head, you wake up with a chip in your brain, but is slowly killing you and no way to pull it out. But that's not the worst part, as the personality of the long-dead rocker boy, Johnny Silverhand, has been copied onto it. Going into Cyberpunk 2077, I assumed Johnny was just going to be Keanu Reeves, with no added flair or soul, only bringing him on for marketing. I mean, don't get me wrong, Reeves is a great actor, but we've only really seen him play variations of the same dude and not much else. Christ, this dude is in a lot of movies. So imagine my surprise to find that Johnny is more or less the punk part of Cyberpunk. So much so that he's almost used to criticize it. Johnny thinks himself to be the main character of the universe. Anybody else is just there to lift him up or put him down with no in-between. His so-called activism is just a way for him to put himself on that pedestal. It doesn't matter who gets hurt along the way, as long as Johnny can say that he is sticking it to the man as the lone wolf to save humanity from its unthankful self. Whenever you make the choice to help others, go with the group, or take aid from those who will give it, Johnny's always there with a smart, disapproving remark about how you can't trust anyone. He's there to influence your every decision, to be either the angel or the devil on your shoulder. Along with the excellent writing, Reeves plays Johnny so well that he just kind of disappears into the role, and I forgot he's not an actual living person inside my head. In fact, the same can be said for Cyberpunk 2077 in its entirety. Gavin Drea and Shirami Lee both do an excellent job at portraying V in both the joyous moments and melancholy sadness that pushes them forward, pushes V through Night City as we meet all of these new people, form new bonds and new connections. Every character is so wonderfully distinct and realized, fully painted as an actual member of the city. Just by interacting with them, you can tell what type of impact Night City has had on them, what type of person it has turned them into. The choices you make throughout the game can either bring you closer to said people or tear you apart. Though no matter what happens, how serious or how silly, Cyberpunk's writing is so good at keeping you engaged, never once taking me out of the experience. Especially since the narrative is spectacular at carrying you from set piece to set piece. Every single mission feels important, like it's pushing the story forward. What takes up to 5 hours of your time in any other game takes me only 1 in Cyberpunk, to the point where it no longer feels like an open world game but instead a linear one, because of Night City itself. There really isn't a single square inch of this game's map wasted. Sure, you could argue that some spots might be rather boring, but I still wouldn't call that wasted. You can usually find a vending machine, random restaurant, some people just hanging out, or just a pile of garbage. It's not something you can really interact with. It's just kind of there, and I love it. It makes even the hidden corners of Night City feel lived in and alive, like there's culture and history represented down to the smallest details. Every single street sign has its own design flair to reflect the store or bar it's attached to, bathing whoever's near in neon light. Every individual radio and TV has its own set of stations that you can just sit down to hear some music or take in the morning Night City news. Even the advertisements have their own charm, often satirizing consumer culture, portraying a world where everything sells, no matter how distasteful. The thousands of little details all add up to make Cyberpunk 2077 dangerously immersive. I love to just get a feel of Night City by walking around the sleek city center, strolling through Jig Jig Street, off-roading in the Badlands, or getting a view from the dam. From anywhere you can practically smell this world, which if I lived in Night City probably wouldn't be a good thing. But still, all of it goes to hammer home that we might be the main character of Cyberpunk 2077, but we are by no means the main character of Night City. In this game, things don't really happen to you, they happen around you. A random street brawl, a full-blown shootout with the cops, a high-speed chase, Cyber Psycho beefing with Max Tack, or one of my favorites, random crime scenes popping up, complete with bodies on the ground, detectives investigating it, cops there to guard, and even futuristic police tape keeping passerbys away. All of these little scenarios happen whether you like it or not. Most of the time you can just sit back and watch everything play out as an innocent bystander, though sometimes it will get right in your way, and before you know it, you're being hunted down by the entirety of the NCPD, though that is a moment I could have entirely avoided, one that would have happened with or without my involvement. All of these little happenings make Night City feel even more alive, like every single NPC has their own life, far outside my render distance, and they go about that life whether or not I'm involved in it, which may be for the better. Driving with keyboard takes some practice. This element of your insignificance also extends towards the main story too. Sure, your actions affect the game and its characters, they even affect the entirety of the US, but no matter what, Night City will still be standing just as it did before, only with a few less people to take up space. I think that's perfect for a game like Cyberpunk, to make the city an almost eternal figure that affects every single thing within its walls. The one thing that immerses you in this game like no other is actually both the in and outside world tech that can be found. And real life tech sucks, and is just kind of annoying to work with most of the time, since tech is often filled to the brim with annoying little imperfections, no matter how old or brand new it is. So naturally, in a world filled with both, Cyberpunk replicates this in a genius way. When you're hacking into cameras, there's a little pixelated zoom effect when you go in and out. Brain dances are grainy and fuzzy. Then there are what I call the outworld examples, such as the in-game menus, which have been expertly incorporated into Cyberpunk. When I open the map, it always takes a brief second to render in. The inventory screen always shows V as staticky whenever you make a change. Quick hack screen can take forever to reveal things. Even the actual settings has a loud hum to it. This is because every game menu you interact with is actually V opening up menus in his head, built in with cybernetic implants. Technology like that is always going to be weird and flawed, but ultimately, those don't get in your way. So when you're doing stuff, it feels like you're actually hacking into an enemy security system, changing your character attributes, or buying a new vehicle when everything is just a tad shoddy from old age. Speaking of vehicles, they are no stranger to age as well. In Cyberpunk, there are about 81 cars and bikes combined, which sounds like a lot, but a large majority are just slight alterations of each other. When you compare that number to other open world games like GTA, which boast over 800, it's a pretty measly amount, though Cyberpunk makes up for it in how different they all feel. Not necessarily to drive, but mostly due to how detailed their interior is. When you're driving an Arasaka Corpo car, it has a much more sleek and modern appearance with padded walls. Very different from my personal favorite, the Quadra Type 66, aka the Hoon. A military-grade vehicle built to last any situation, as it's strapped down to the bones with not just armor, but two full auto machine guns that can turn any opponent into mincemeat. The inside feels like you're in a tank. Not much for visibility, but all for safety and secrecy. After all, Cyberpunk is about the feel and style, which you have in abundance while driving through Night City. Driving might be my favorite part of Cyberpunk 2077. You can fast travel, it's far more convenient, but whenever I do, I feel like I'm cheating myself, cheating Night City. After all, it's never that far of a drive, at least it never feels like it. Seeing all of the people walking, other cars, stores, and buildings flying by, whether in the bright of day or the dark of night, the city is intoxicating. All of this, everything I've talked about so far in the video, culminates to make Cyberpunk 2077 by far the most immersive game I've ever played. Though this is all just about the vibe, the feel of Cyberpunk, as I haven't talked about where another huge factor of the immersion comes from, the gameplay. At first, Cyberpunk combat can feel a bit strange. The gunplay is fine for what it is, a bit floaty and lacking the tightness you'd expect from a first-person shooter. But as you play more, you realize this game isn't an FPS, instead it's a bona fide RPG. Let's say you can go down the shooter route. Well, as you progress the game, you'll find better guns that feel tighter to use. You'll use the skill tree to dump your XP into abilities that harness their full abilities, along with some new ones. Or let's say you want to do what I did in this playthrough, that being a hyper-fast blade-wielding ninja. It started out by buying some Mantis Blade cyberware, 2 swords that can come out of your forearms, eventually tuning them so they can overheat and set enemies on fire. Then I bought some skills that allow me to deflect bullets, countering any heavy infantry, though I have to get close to them, so I got the Fortified Ankles, cyberware that lets me jump super high into the air, and used a relic ability that let me lunge super duper far with the Mantis Blades. Then for the cherry on top, I unlocked the ability to use finishers, attacks that will instantly kill any enemy low enough in style. There's still a lot I haven't even unlocked, and I'm still having so much fun playing Cyberpunk as a melee action game. That's just a few of the builds I've tried, as there is so many other different ones you can have in Cyberpunk. How about a heavyweight brawler who only uses fists? A knife-throwing assassin that can make their enemies bleed before finishing them off? There is so much in store in Cyberpunk that it can be a bit overwhelming. So if you haven't played the game before, I would highly recommend not going into it with a specific build in mind. Cyberpunk is very good at showing you all of your options right from the start without you realizing. So much so that you'll naturally lean into it and find the perfect playstyle for yourself before you even know it. Though no matter what you choose, you will always be rewarded for sticking it through, as Cyberpunk has a lot of immersive sim elements. As I described before, there are so many different ways you can go about completing a mission, not just combat-wise. You need to get through a door? Well, if you're pretty straightforward, you can just kill everybody to find your way around it. If you're a netrunner and leveled your tech ability enough, then you might be able to hack it. If you're stealthy, you might find the bad guy who has the key. Or if you have enough strength, you could just rip it open without a second thought. Different builds also allow you access to different dialogue options depending on your knowledge. Whatever you do, whatever option you go with, Cyberpunk 2077 will always have 100 other possibilities in store for you, giving this game an insane amount of replay value since you can practically just make it a different game with each build. I can't wait to keep dropping into Night City in the future, not only with Cyberpunk 2077, but its excellent DLC, which brought its own slew of new content to the game. There's also the Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime, but that deserves its own video for another time. Hopefully CD Projekt Red plans to revisit Night City in a sequel sometime soon.